I don't care though. Anyway, I want to play this clip of Ben Shapiro talking to Ron DeSantis because I think it's interesting. People have heard me. Obviously, I don't agree with Ben on a lot of things, but I do think that he's right here. Trump has been parroting Democrat COVID talking points about deaths in Florida.
How about the fact that he had the third most deaths of any state having to do with the China virus or COVID? Even Cuomo did better. He was number 4.
Which is exactly what CNN and all the Democrat media did. They were like, everybody's dying in Florida, but they didn't talk about per capita. They didn't talk about all Xmas mortality. They didn't talk about age. They didn't talk about PCR tests. They didn't talk about how they're testing. They talked about nothing. It's pure propaganda. That's who Trump is now, I guess. That's how he wants to beat DeSantis. And Shapiro asked DeSantis about it, and I thought his answer was great. And I'll explain why. Let's watch.
Today, the president actually attacked you by suggesting that Andrew Cuomo had done a better job in New York, which is sort of a shocking thing coming from a president who's declared that he is the enemy of the left when it comes to COVID. Andrew Cuomo, of course, did not do a better job. He's been citing statistics suggesting using sort of absolute numbers of people who died per state as opposed to looking at population adjusted, which of course seems deeply dishonest just on a statistical level. What's your take on those attacks?
They're very bizarre. I mean, first of all, Florida had less excess mortality than California or New York. Part of that is because states like California had excess mortality derived from the lockdown policies, which is really, really avoidable mortality. But if he thinks Cuomo handled it better, that's an indication if something like this were to happen again, he would double down and do what he did in March of 2020. That was a difficult situation. We didn't have all the facts, and people can kind of understand, if you did things that may not have worked out. But we all have to sit here today in 2023, look back at March of 2020 and say Fauciism was wrong. Fauciism was destructive. Fauciism has set us on this path with the CARES Act and the Fed printing money, creating inflation, and creating some of the economic problems that we have today. So if you could do it again, would he do the same thing? I sure hope not.
Just the way that DeSantis talks, I don't trust him. He talks like a politician. It's like eye contact's weird. And obviously I've talked about Shapiro. We disagree on a lot of stuff. This is the sort of thing that kind of confuses me. Let me know what you know in the comments. So outside of what DeSantis just said, for years, I've had my own brain. I've done my own reporting. I've broken away from the hive minds of the left and the right. And during April, May, June, July, August, we could count till 2021, 2022. I've done hundreds of videos. Anybody who's followed me from there can say I've done hundreds of videos tapping into the data of COVID. I've talked about PCR tests. I've lost a lot of money doing it and got censored. I've talked about in Cleveland or the Cleveland News, I can't remember exactly what it was, in Ohio, how they count cases. And they weren't even using tests in a lot of states to count cases. So when it comes to the COVID case rate and the COVID death rate, they're all suspect in general, just based on how they're counting. And then the media wasn't talking about per capita. If you live in a town of 500 versus 5 million, the deaths matter. You got to do per capita, not just that. And then also there's stuff like excess mortality when it comes to lockdowns. You get what I'm saying? It's like if you're only counting COVID cases, but you're not considering that lockdowns killed some people, these are not accurate numbers. So long story short, before Trump or DeSantis or anyone said anything about this stuff, I don't really care about them. I know what I'm talking about with this because I've put in thousands of hours of research and thousands of hours of video content doing this type of reporting, studying for years. So when Trump comes out and just takes a rehashed Democrat talking point saying, Florida has so many deaths and like COVID deaths and, he did worse than Cuomo. That's not true. That's the same thing that CNN and MSNBC were saying when DeSantis decided to turn course and open up. And Gavin Newsom decided to close down. And they were doing this little like Florida versus California. The media for years was like, Florida should shut down because there's too many deaths. They were calling him Death Santis. I've done dozens of videos about this saying these are not true. So now that Donald Trump says what CNN and MSNBC used to say, which I've already done 15 videos to debunk, do people expect me to just be like, oh, yeah, that's true now because Trump said it and I can't like DeSantis. It's like the truth is the truth, whether Ben Shapiro says this or this. If Ben Shapiro says vaccines are amazing on one day and then he says vaccines, I don't trust them on the other day, my stance of how I feel about that doesn't change based on what Shapiro does. I don't play opposite day to disagree with him, and I certainly don't agree with him when he lies or, in my view, isn't accurate. So this is like the weird part. What DeSantis just said there, where he's like, I'll give people a few months if you didn't know what was going on at first. And you can be critical of lockdowns and DeSantis if you're Ian Smith or you're Basilicos or you're somebody who really never caved. Like Ian Smith criticizes DeSantis, and it makes sense. It's like Ian Smith went way harder than DeSantis. So when Ian Smith says DeSantis, it wasn't that good on lockdowns, I agree with him. It's like, yeah, compared to you and others, he wasn't. And that's valid criticism. And I love it. But when Donald Trump says it, it doesn't make any sense for multiple reasons. One, he's using Democrat talking points that never made sense in 2020, and they still don't make sense now because it's completely out of context. And also, DeSantis has admitted that he was wrong for the first few months, and he even said there, I was figuring it out, and now we have to look back at March and say we were wrong. And Trump has never said that. That's the whole issue. I don't even want to like DeSantis that much because I don't, but it's like, Donald Trump 3 years later is still lying about this stuff. He's got people he worked for. I forget his name, Peter Navarro. He's on Twitter saying Trump got fooled by Fauci and Birx. And it's like, that's what you say. But when has Trump said that? When has Trump come on TV and be like, I got fooled by Fauci and Birx? He doesn't, because he still sounds like Fauci and Birx. This is the dynamic that I feel like people don't understand. I'm not trying to rehash old times forever because it doesn't make sense to do that. But when you have an entire movement of influencers and politicians and people that have admitted that that was a mistake, but the leader of the movement, who's the front runner, won't admit that, he sells vaccines way too hard still, and then looks back on somebody who did a better job at something he did and says that it never happened, it just doesn't make sense. None of this stuff makes sense. And I don't even know how to fit into this movement anymore. It's like, do you want me to erase my memory like Men in Black and just be like, I don't know anything about COVID data. So when Trump says what CNN used to say, then I'm just going to say that that's cool and that makes sense. It doesn't make sense. What makes sense is looking back on it and being like, yeah, we didn't know what was going on for a while. It was a tough gig. You know, I did what I had to do, but in hindsight, we'll never do that again. I haven't heard that from the Trump camp, but I just heard that from DeSantis. So long story short, I don't trust him. I obviously don't trust Ben Shapiro, but there's this weird, I would say, battle going on. And I talked about it with the Target stuff where people are acting psychotic towards each other over this fight and acting fake. They're just like faking it because they've told themselves in their head, this guy's the real one, this guy's the fake one. So I gotta defend whatever this one says, even if he's lying, even if he becomes CNN, even if he starts becoming more left than I really am, I gotta really say why. And it's just confusing because then I just sit here and and say exactly what I've been saying for years, and it's still accurate. And the same people that were praising me last year for saying this stuff are now bashing me. You got people like, oh, we know what? I did this reporting in 2020. I said that this was a lie in 2020. Everyone said, good job. I said this statement was a lie in 2021 based on the data, and everyone claps. Now that I say it, people get mad at me because Trump said the other thing. I don't understand. And when it comes to splitting the party, I've heard a lot of narrative where people say him running splits the party. If people can't watch a competition of two politicians that probably don't care about you that much compete over donor money, they're both getting hundreds of millions. If people can't watch that and act somewhat civil and not just completely act like children, it's not Trump's fault and it's not DeSantis's fault. Trump didn't make you do that, and DeSantis didn't make you do that. This is inside of people all the time, just waiting to come out. So it's like, everyone keeps telling me that he shouldn't have run. He should have just waited. Why? Why should somebody that's taking Democrat COVID talking points that say they listen to Chris Christie to hire the FBI director?
But I put somebody in that the other side, everybody agreed to. You know who recommended him to me? Chris Christie. Okay, he recommended him. And that's okay. I don't mind that. I've taken Chris Christie's recommendations before. And other people wanted Christopher Wray.
Why should that person be unchallenged? Not only should that person be challenged in politics, that person should be challenged by influencers. That person should be challenged by right-wing journalists. That person should be challenged by interviewers. But he hasn't been challenged for the last 3 years. People have been telling me to shut up since 2020. It's like he's pushing lockdowns. I say it's bad. People tell me to shut up. He's pushing the vaccine. I say it doesn't make sense. People tell me to shut up. DeSantis did it too, and I called him out when he did it. It's just like the difference is after like 5 sales, he's like, all right, I'm on the other side. And then it's like Trump just kept going in the wrong direction. He still has never changed. He doesn't care. So I don't understand the dynamic of like, why shouldn't that person be challenged? That's our movement now. I feel like in 2018, the movement was like crushing, raw truth. Now the movement's like, I don't know. You get what I'm saying? It's like, no, if he says what CNN and Democrats said to shut down Florida, then, you're not allowed to disagree with it. Paul said, so pick one, damn it, screaming at me. I've told people if the election were tomorrow, who I would choose, but clearly people don't want to hear my opinion. My whole life doesn't revolve around what Trump or DeSantis does. To me, that like, I get that that's what some people do. They're like professional fans and stuff. You go into that voting booth and I'll go into that voting booth and you get to make your choice and I make my choice and our vote counts the same. But I also do journalism. I also do hip hop music. I also do news analysis. I'm not DeSantis and I'm not Trump. I don't have to agree with everything that they say. If DeSantis says the sky's orange and Trump says the sky's purple and the sky's blue, I don't have to choose between orange and purple. I do news analysis. Someone said you really have it out for Trump. I really don't. Someone said you never make mistakes. You're not acknowledging the issue. I'm not saying Trump made a mistake in 2021, 2022, 2023, and I will never forgive him for it. I'm waiting to forgive him. He just hasn't changed. He's now getting worse on COVID rhetoric than he was 2 years ago.
How about the fact that he had the third most deaths of any state having to do with the China virus or COVID? Even Cuomo did better. He was number 4.
DeSantis said, yeah, it's okay that you messed up for a few months. Everyone forgives you, but just get on the right side now.
And people can kind of understand, if you did things that may not have worked out. But we all have to sit here today in 2023, look back at March of 2020 and say Fauciism was wrong.
And Trump just can't do it. He sounds like CNN now. So what you want me to do is say, CNN COVID propaganda is good now because Trump is saying it in order to try to make Florida look bad because he wants to win an election. That's what you want me to do. I'm not a professional fan. I'm not a liar. I don't have no soul. I have a soul. I have a brain. I've done thousands of hours of reporting. You're asking me to lie and become an idiot in order to mold my mind to what a political candidate says. It's insane. I don't have to agree with DeSantis or Trump. I see the flaws in DeSantis and Trump. I'm not saying they're irrefutable and you can never make it, but when someone doesn't learn, it's like if you have a crackhead at your house and he just keeps smoking crack every day, and then 5 years later he's still smoking crack, and you say he's done smoking crack, forgive him. He's not done. You get what I'm saying? It's like with the issue that's most important to me, which is the COVID tyranny, and you could say it's not important to you. A lot of people don't care. I think it's the root of everything. Capitalism died when COVID came around. Freedom died when COVID came around. Free market died when COVID came around. So I don't see it as this fringe passing issue. I see it as the biggest issue of the generation. And if people aren't, and all I'm asking for Trump is not to go back in time and do it right. I'm asking for him to look at all of the communism, all of the socialism, all of the tyranny, all of the vaccine scams, all of the everything, and just be like, it's not that great. Or just give me like something, not be like, I'm going to say that guy did what I did, and I'm going to just say that Florida people are dying. Like, that doesn't do it for me. I'm a voter. I get to vote how I want. You can't bully me into thinking like you. I think if we can't have a leader that can look at what happened, because everything that we liked left, everything great that Trump did pretty much got wiped away. All of his accomplishments of 2016 to 2019 got wiped away in 2020. So if you really want to get my vote, you got to look at that and be like, listen, that all wiped it away. These people did it. You can't find that, though. Find me the video where Trump says Fauci lied to me and Fauci sucks and he's really doing a terrible job. And I've seen more videos of him be like, call me Tony, telling Peter Navarro to shut up when Peter Navarro wrote an op-ed about Fauci. Like, I just don't see it that way. And honestly, the more I see people on social media, I'm reading opinions. I'm not stupid. I'm not fake. If you could show me something that I don't know and tell me the truth, then I'll be like, yeah, no, that makes sense. But nobody's making sense. I'm looking at some of the smartest influencers I follow, and they're just playing it safe, saying the most generic, basic thing that they think will keep them afloat in their social circles. I see the speech laws that DeSantis is passing in Israel, and Trump passes the same speech laws in America, and so does Joe Biden. I know that that's a policy that never changes, and there's not anybody running that seems to really care about that. Thomas Massey cares about that. Thomas Massey votes against it, and he's endorsing DeSantis. So, I'm not saying that changes my decision, but I know who I like. I know who I believe, and there's certain things that both are going to happen. It's like, do I want the banks to be revolutionized? I don't know if that's going to happen. Today, they said that Republicans were voting on spending or whatever. Like Republicans are going to raise the debt ceiling. It's like, yeah, that's not a shocker to me. Like anybody who thinks like Republicans are going to stick it to the left with the banks, they're not. You get what I'm saying? It's like they're going to do what the banks want them to do because the banks probably have more leverage over Republicans. So if Trump and DeSantis aren't going to do this, if Trump and DeSantis are exactly the same on this negative thing, I have to go on everything else: foreign policy, COVID policy, hiring, pragmatism, the ability to actually get stuff done and hire the right people in the cabinet. And I don't see what other people see. I'm willing to be convinced, but people can't convince me by just yelling at me. And someone said, how the hell can he sound like CNN when he pissed off CNN? Anthony, my friend, I'm going to explain it to you. From 2020 to 2023, okay? Just hear me out. I understand that Trump did a deal with CNN and went on CNN and fought CNN. I understand that. But you got to listen to me. From 2020 to 2023, CNN, MSNBC, all of liberal media, Democrats, they were trying to smear Florida because after a few months, Ron DeSantis became the vocal leader against lockdowns. I'm not saying he did a perfect job. He absolutely did it, and he deserves to be scrutinized. But I'm saying for years after he made a mistake, he became the leader who said, we're open for business, we're open for travel, we're open for vacation, and we're not California. What CNN, MSNBC, and Democrats did was they started painting false perceptions of the COVID data. They didn't tell people about the real death rate, the real case rate, how PCR tests work, how they're not even using PCR tests to test some people, and they're inflating these numbers like crazy without talking about the downsides of lockdowns and all of the physical ills that come along with treating people like slaves and prisoners. So they started saying, Death Santis. All these people are dying in Florida. But they weren't talking about per capita, which matters. They weren't talking about how many elderly people that were there. They weren't talking about excess mortality of people dying from other stuff. And they didn't talk about how loosely they were using the word COVID. So now Trump, who never used to say this a year ago, he just wants to beat DeSantis, he's now coming around and regurgitating the same propaganda that Democrats and CNN were saying. He's saying Florida killed more people than Cuomo. That's not true. He's not talking about per capita. He's not talking about other excess mortality. He's not talking about the average age. He's not talking about how they're testing. He's not talking about how they're counting. That if people actually cared to blow this COVID scheme out of the water, they tell you about PCR tests, how they're counting, and how they're testing. Because once you get through all of that, the numbers don't actually matter or make sense that much. But he doesn't care because he's running around selling the product that is getting that is capitalizing off of all of these people being lost and confused. So he's doing and saying the exact same thing that CNN and Democrats used to say. He doesn't believe what he's saying. None of his supporters believe that. And all of them, you could probably find tweets from 2020 where they're disagreeing with CNN saying that everyone's dying in Florida, because everyone wasn't dying in Florida and their death rate wasn't that high when it comes to the metrics that matter. But you can lie with statistics and be like, New York has more people dying than Utah. Well, how many people are in New York and how many people are in Utah? If you don't even tell me the per capita and you just say that more people are dying in New York City than in, Sturgis, South Dakota. Yeah, of course. But that doesn't necessarily mean Sturgis is healthier. It means that there's 10 times, I don't know how many more people in New York City. So this is like the most generic, blatant lie that he's not explaining. So that, people could get mad at me all they want, but I'm authentic and I tell the truth. My whole life doesn't revolve around molding my mind to what DeSantis and Trump says. If DeSantis signs a speech law in a foreign country that I disagree with, I'm not going to cave. I'm not going to cave to the Republican establishment. I'm not going to cave to the organizations that are trying to smear me as a hate monger. I believe that that's not a way to stop hate or violence, and that's a way to infringe on American rights and make the matters worse. If BLM runs around and causes tension, I'm not going to say they're amazing because I don't want people to think I'm racist. I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't care what the cost is. And when Trump or DeSantis says something that I don't agree with, my job is not to be a professional PR team. Everybody else is a professional PR team for the guy. Nobody believes what they're saying. You listen to people who've made excuses for Trump, they're digging deep in their bag to figure out why, trying to figure out why they're saying he's too old, he got fooled, he listened to his advisors, he doesn't know anything about vaccine injuries. None of those are even true. He knew about vaccine injuries in 2014, unless he just forgot. None of these excuses even make sense. It's like people that don't even believe what Trump's saying are so desperate to make an excuse for something they don't even believe that they're just making stuff up at this point. How does that make you a patriot or a hero? It just makes you like a professional, coattail rider of a politician. And the whole point of this stream is to tell people that you actually have the power over your life, not Trump or DeSantis. As far as my vote for Trump or DeSantis, I'm not pledging my vote to either of them. I want them to compete. And I'm trying to use my vote and my platform as leverage. Right now, I don't see DeSantis lying about many things besides the fact that he's running over to foreign countries, signing away our rights, which is insane. But it's not like Trump doesn't also do that. Trump also did that. He just didn't leave the country to sign it. With that being said, I want these guys to compete for me. DeSantis seems like he's taking the competition somewhat seriously. Trump is acting like a child. He's acting like CNN. He's just calling names. He's accusing him of things that he's also doing. That's not a way to win my vote. It might be a way to win your vote, and that's fine. Agree to disagree. If DeSantis wins the primary, I'm voting for DeSantis over Biden. If Trump wins the primary, I'm voting for Trump over Biden. I don't want Joe Biden. Whether it's Trump or DeSantis, I see the value in them when it comes to judges, Supreme Court stuff, and just rolling the dice. Border security, even if they do a half-assed job is better than no job. So I'm not one of these influencers that's crying. People act like I'm the problem. You know who the problem are? The people are like, I'm not going to vote if it's not Trump, or I'm not going to vote if it's not DeSantis. Then don't vote then. It's like, the election doesn't matter, but I'm going to complain about your opinions on the election. If it doesn't matter and it doesn't count, then why are you even tapping into a show that's talking about it? People believe that it matters and there's a way, or else they wouldn't be paying attention. So I'm just being honest about it. It's like, I have my perspective and I'm trying to use my leverage to get Donald Trump and DeSantis to compete for my vote. You get what I'm saying? Nobody else wants to do that. When Republicans made McCarthy flop like a fish for a few weeks and thinking he's going to get his nice little throne, and he never got it, they got a few guarantees out of that, or so they claim. I don't know if it worked, but when you're just going to get the silver spoon and people take the silver spoon away from you for 2 weeks, it makes you work for it. I don't think Trump just deserves to win. I think he needs to work for it. I think he's done a terrible job over the last few years, and he's only getting worse every single year. And the reason he's getting worse is because nobody wants to challenge him. He's surrounded by a bunch of yes men and snakes. And you can't tell me that he has better people around him, because I'm watching his campaign, and his campaign is worse than 2016 or 2020. Which dingbat, opportunist loser that he has around him is like, yeah, Trump, just take CNN's Democrat COVID data talking points